Hi everyone, this is Ron Pereira with Gemba Academy, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar where we're going to focus on a day in the life of a lean supervisor, which is going to be presented by Mike Wroblewski. Okay, so a little bit about the Kaizen Institute. So the Kaizen Institute was founded by Mr. Masaki Yamai and is celebrating its 27th year of lean training and consulting. The Kaizen Institute operates in over 30 countries with 350 consultants serving all kinds of industries. And to learn more about Kaizen Institute, if you're in America, go to us.kaizen.com, or if you're outside of the States, you can just simply go to kaizen.com. Now, a little bit about Gemba Academy. So we provide online and DVD-based lean training. We have over 230 lean training videos available now, and we add new content every month. More than 1,000 companies around the world are now using our training, and kind of excited that last month we celebrated our third year of being in business. Now, we're doing something kind of different for this webinar. It's the first time that we've ever done this. And so to say thank you for those people that attended this webinar, we're going to give everybody a 35% discount on any Gemba Academy order. And this is going to be good through Monday, April 9th, 2012. So less than a week. And so the way that works is if you're not a customer already, you would just go to our products page on GembaAcademy.com. Pick the product that you're interested in. You're going to come to a page where you put all your credit card and all that in. You're just going to enter the coupon code webinar like we're shown here. That's step 2. Then step 3, we're going to hit apply. It's very important. Once you hit apply, the discount will come off. So in this example, the original order was for $795, and with the 35% discount, you save $278. Okay. Now, if you're already a subscriber to Gemba Academy, you can still take advantage of this as well. When you order new DVDs within your membership site, this coupon code will work for you as well. Okay. So a little bit about our presenter. So Mike Wroblewski brings over 25 years of manufacturing management experience, strong technical skills, and a passion for teaching Kaizen and lean manufacturing to the Kaizen Institute team. Now, Mike's journey into lean manufacturing began in the early 1980s while working as an industrial engineer for the Hill-Rom company. Under the watchful eye of Mr. Shigeo Shingo, Mike successfully improved a die changeover from 45 minutes to less than 5 minutes. Mike learned firsthand from the master, Shigeo Shingo, the techniques of the SMED system along with the early teachings of eliminating waste from manufacturing operations. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Mike and let him go from here.
Thank you, Ron. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar today on a day in the life of a lean supervisor. I'm actually in our office at Kaizen Institute in Mukilteo, Washington, alongside with Cost Tailored. So welcome. I know Cost Tailored folks are attending this webinar here. And we also have several people out here that are having pizza parties when they're watching this. So please enjoy your pizza, and let me go through the agenda and what we're going to talk about today. On the topic today, I want to cover a few points. One is, what is the definition of a supervisor in the contents of the training that we're going to go through today? And then what are the 5 needs or skills of a lean supervisor? Then what are the roles of that supervisor? And the best way to help demonstrate, in my opinion, how this works in a lean system is go through a sample day of a life of a lean supervisor. And as we go through the day, we will see where some of the tools can be used to help a lean supervisor prepare and set up and perform the tasks that a lean supervisor should do. So hopefully that presentation will allow you to see how this works together. And then I'll conclude with some characteristics of what a lean supervisor has. And then we can open it up and answer questions, and then see how we can get you to understand a little bit better on the critical role of a lean supervisor in your company. First of all, the purpose. Really, the purpose of this webinar is really quite simple. It's to provide a vision for what your day should be like in the ideal world of the supervisor. Obviously, it's going to be impossible for you to meet all the things stated in this part of the training and what we talk about during the day, but that should be your goal, to strive toward what is the ideal day that we should set up. It should also become clear as how important it is to set standard schedules, or what we would call leader standard work, to help you track towards having a better day for your supervisors. Now, if you're a manager, you need to look at this as a little bit different set of eyes. What are you doing in order to help your supervisor prepare and have a day like this? What are you doing to develop an environment that will allow them to practice what is being taught? So look at it not that this is how your standard work should be, although we can get into future modules and webinars on standard work for other leaders besides the lean supervisor. But look at it as, what kind of environments am I allowing this to happen within my company? So for this discussion on the webinar, we're talking about line production leaders when we talk about the lean supervisor. There's a lot of different titles that people use. You can use supervisors. Team leaders is a very popular title. Even value stream leaders, and in some countries, honcho is a term that's quite popular to use for that frontline leadership staff that deals with the associates, the team members, the people that actually make the product or the service that you have within your company. So our definition of a supervisor in this context is really just the leader who directs, coaches, and inspects the work, actions, and performance of others. And when we look at this, we're trying to look at it as that you're a coach versus the enforcer of the direction of the company. So don't look at it as one that enforces and judges and checks on other people's performance and looking over their shoulder. We're looking at this as a cooperative coaching effort and allowing you to improve the skills of your employees while you meet the objectives. Now, I understand the role of a frontline leadership position. It's a very, very difficult position. Some people say it's, you know, the traditional between a rock and a hard place, and it's not one that a lot of people find that it's a very challenging role, and they find it very difficult to do because you're being tugged in all kinds of different directions. And I understand that. You've got quality, you've got customers, you've got management pulling on you. You may or not have a union to have to deal with issues there. All kinds of things that are being pulled, so it's a very difficult job. And this is a process to really help you be a little bit better from getting away from being a firefighter and trying to just survive the day to how can you be a little bit more proactive, and how can you focus on the basic foundations of continuous improvement within the role of a supervisor. To start off with, there are 5 necessary skills that consist of a good lean supervisor. The first one is knowledge of work. And when we talk about knowledge of work, we're talking about what kind of work is being done in the area that you're in charge of. What are the processes? How well do you know the processes? And you should know the processes backwards and forwards, inside out. You should be the one that knows every single process in your area. What are the equipment that's being used? What are the tools? All the elements within the work should be known by the lean supervisor. The second element is knowledge of job responsibilities. Now, this is knowing more of what's entailed from the management point of view, what's expected of me as a supervisor of an area. What are some of the policies that the company has? What are some of the work rules? What's the union contract if I have a union contract? So a lot of those responsibilities you have to understand, and you have to make sure that when you understand those responsibilities that it has to be done in a safe work environment. So that's what you need to deliver from your role from a management point of view. Then there's the ability to Kaizen. You should have a good foundation of basic Kaizen skills. You should have knowledge of 5S. You should have knowledge of practical problem solving. Certainly you want to follow the plan, do, check, act cycle. Teach the associates in your area how to use plan, do, check, act, how to look for continuous improvement on a daily basis. Those should be all comfortable skills within a lean supervisor. In addition, you should have the ability to lead. Are you able to communicate very well? Can you set directions? Can you lead by example? In Japan, there's a saying that kids learn by watching your back. And they're not going to learn by what you tell them. They're going to see what you actually do. So if you say one thing and do another, you know, what would a child in Japan perceive? They'll just follow what you do, not necessarily what you say. So that ability of leadership and leading by example is very critical. And the management example you see in most companies, where do team leaders or where do associates see that? Of course, their first leader, their frontline leadership staff, is the key person that sets the culture of what is the company expectations. Well, how do we do work here at this company? So that's where it's very critical that this lean supervisor has a good ability to lead. And then finally is the ability to teach. And I think this is probably the most understated skill that we have as far as our lean supervisors in most manufacturing companies that I visit. We don't expect our team staff to be good teachers. They just have to police policy, check attendance. They would make sure that people are following basic rules, but they don't really look at how to teach. And what do you teach? What are some of the skills that you would think you would teach? Of course, there would be how to Kaizen would be one. What's plan, do, check, act? How to do a particular job. So therefore, knowledge of work becomes very important, because if you don't know the work, how can you teach the associates in the area how to do that job? So all this works together to build a very good team environment to be able to match with what the objectives for continuous improvement on a daily basis should be. Now, with those 5 necessary skills, 2 are knowledge types, and the other ones are ability types. And then what we want to do is look to see where your supervisors have those abilities and how we as leaders can train or teach those abilities and that knowledge to our supervisors. And then the other thing is, even though we're talking just the frontline supervisors, what about us as managers and other leaders within the company? Shouldn't we have those same skills? And I would say yes. I would say, even though we say this is just for a lean supervisor, I would expect that we have the same model for any level of leadership within an organization. And yes, that means that all managers, directors, vice presidents, they should be teaching too. And they should lead, and they should have the knowledge of Kaizen to go forward. One of the things that can help us in the teaching is from training within the industry, job instruction training. If you're not familiar with that, I would encourage you to look through your resources on the internet and understand how you can use job instruction to really make it easier to teach. And one of the things about job instruction, although we're not going to go into a big module of how to teach that, it really is how do you break down the job for instruction. It's about important steps, about key points. And how you do that is prepare the operator to learn, give them a proper demonstration of the actual task, and then have the operator try out the performance, and then you taper off your coaching as you continue to follow up as the operator grasps more and more how to do that step. So it's a very good, concise way to teach, and I encourage you to look forward and learn how to use that as a potential easy way as a training model. So the Lean Supervisor is really the key, the heart of Lean success. That's where you're going to see most of the culture being passed to all your team members and associates. And that's the one that really, if you look at it, helps flow the process, just like a heart does, keeping it through the system as we want to make continuous improvement a daily cultural activity. So what's the role of a Lean Supervisor? Well, one is that you should have rapid response. Just when we put in and-on systems, they need to be the go-to person, the first responder when issues happen out in say a production facility, in an area, or even in the office. So that Lean Supervisor should be available to respond rapidly to any issues that come up. And then maintain the flow. You have a flow of a process going through, and you want to maintain that flow of the process throughout the day. So that means you need to monitor it, and then you have to look for where there's issues that, like problems that come up, and then help correct those problems to keep that flow going. And of course, we have the basics of quality, safety, quality, and delivery. That we're trying to make sure that those are done within the contents of a good, safe working environment, and then we hit the deliverables of customer expectations. So to put this all in perspective, let's walk through a sample of a day in the life of a Lean Supervisor to see what we would think is just a model of a typical shift operator, and as they go through the process. Now also realize that even though this is a sample day, it's not a day that you would repeat every day this way. There will be some modifications, some tasks you would do once a week or once a month, so you would actually change this. But as a good typical sample, let's walk through what would happen on a typical day. So let's start out with 6:15 in the morning. You arrive before the shift starts. This is where you prepare for the day. And some of the things that you want to prepare for are making sure everything's ready. One of the first things that I would suggest is checking a shift-to-shift logbook. That's something that is a simple document that you can create. It can be something in a book. It can actually be on a computer system if you are more into the digital world. Certainly can do that. You can put them on iPads for that matter. But the idea is that you have this simple shift log, and it's just 2 simple columns, date and issues, so that you can easily communicate past information between shifts, be it first to second, second to third, and on to first. And you keep it in the same location. And you want to make this a real easy, simple book where you just focus on problems, not the person, and just write down the issues so that you can pass that information along. And you can file this throughout the whole day, and that way it's very easy at the end of the day when you prepare to make sure that the book is ready for the next shift. But you should make this really simple in the fact that any executive could go up to this book and review it and understand the status of what's happening in your area and what some of the issues that are going on. So it's a great communication tool. Another thing you want to do when you begin the day is confirm startup conditions. How often do we go to a work area and don't even look over the work area to make sure we're ready for the day? And that could be things like, is the tools on the right place? Is standard work posted in the proper place? Is the material positioned in the right place? Do we have everything set up to start off the day on a good note? A lot of times we come into a place and we have to set up while we're there when we start the day. Let's do this ahead of time and make sure it's set up. One of the tests that you can do is if someone was to come into your facility, say on a Sunday night, and they look at your area, would it be ready that if you flipped on the lights and turn on the power that you're ready to run production first thing on Monday morning, or is it there are a lot of things that you have to do and gather? Do you have to search for material, search for tools? So that's the kind of things that we want to look at when we start up. Make sure all that stuff is ready. Now 6:45 runs around, and your team members are probably coming into the work area. Well, here's a great opportunity for you to start the communication, set a positive attitude. Shake their hands, say hello, hi, how are you doing, good morning. Basically have that positive attitude of greeting the team members. So why do you think that would be important? Why would we want to greet team members? Do we just let them go into their work area and don't talk to them all day long? Or do we set up an environment where we can show that we're here as a team, it's going to be a good day, and start out with a positive attitude? And smile when you do that. It's just amazing what that positive attitude does in your environment. I actually visited a client a couple weeks ago, and it was a quite large facility, and I was there early in the morning, and this facility actually had a guarded gate at the beginning and had a security guard that we had to pass through before we were allowed onto the property. What was amazing about this is the security guard had the biggest smile on his face, and it looked like he was dancing. Yes, actually dancing in a circle, practicing his moves. And I looked at that and I said, well, that's kind of strange. So as I pulled up to the gate, he burst out with nothing but positive attitude of like, good morning, how are you doing today? And it was so easy to have that positive attitude transferred from him to me. And I felt happier just as I passed the gate, talking with him to feel that energy. Don't underestimate that that's something that we can do each day as we greet our team members. Now 6:50 runs around. This is a great time to have the daily startup meeting. I highly encourage to look at having a daily huddle, daily startup meeting. It can be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. It could be a little bit longer if you need it. But the idea is that you get communication flowing. Talk about safety in your first agenda item. Note any near misses that happened in the shift before or that happened the day before. Talk about quality concerns. You certainly want to look at anything major that's happening or any customer disappointments that you learned about in the last 24 hours. Look at production issues. What's going to be on today's schedule? Is there some things you got to juggle around? Are there some current issues that you want to talk about and let the team understand? You can even get into assignments as to who's going to be in what area. And then any special notes that happen. You know, are you having visitors? Is there a special pilot run? What Kaizen activities are going on? But you can determine the agenda to be able to communicate very well what's going to happen as you start up the day. One of the things you can do is start confirming attendance. It's always pretty important to make sure you know who's assigned in what area. But I would also recommend you can chart and post this not only for your actual line, but you can do it in a project room or in the office, but keep track of who's here and what day so you can visually see the process of basic attendance, and that way you can report it later on. So that'd be one activity you can also do in your startup process. One of the keys of having a startup meeting is look at having a communication board to talk around. Here's an example of a simple type kiosk where all the information is set up based in safety, quality, delivery, and cost, but all the employees can gather around it and use this communication board as your centerpiece of what you can talk around, and you're talking about the information that's on the board, and you're talking as that as your guide. Have this agenda set up as you go through this meeting and follow that. Use this communication board as the central piece of where people can gather around. So why use the communication boards? Well, it is promoting a standard way of working, especially when you have it on a daily, regular basis. You have an agenda that you're going to follow. It develops your teamwork. You certainly have shared ownership when everybody's focused on these are the problems we as a team need to work on. Everybody loves to be informed. I don't like going into areas and not knowing what my expectations are, what I need to do, and don't assume people know that. You know, just let people know this is what we need to do today, and everybody's now aligned and informed, and they can ask questions. It does promote a behavior of values that you want everybody's team input as you go forward. And then you're starting to look at being a proactive approach. You're not going through the process of saying, well, what's happening to the day and what problems I have and reacting to them. This is where you're setting up a plan and going forward to attack the day going forward versus seeing what happens to you as the day progresses. So what are the tips for a better stand-up meeting? We could have a whole webinar just on stand-up meetings, and I'm sure that would be a fun thing to do in the future. But here are some simple tips to really help you get started. As I mentioned before, have an agenda that you follow. Make it standard work. That makes it easy to run the meetings. So you want to create this, follow it, and then I'd even post it up as one of the elements on your communication board. Try to be brief and concise. You don't have to have 2- and 3-hour meetings. A 5, 10, 15-minute stand-up meeting would work out very well, especially if you follow that standard agenda. Then you don't stray into other areas that will tend to pull you off course. And just say you're only going to allow 2 minutes for this discussion. You're going to allow 1 or 3 minutes for this discussion, and then keep it to that time agenda. That way you can keep it brief. I would certainly encourage two-way communication as long as it's staying on topic of your agenda. This way you can seek some input, but realizing this meeting's not set up to solve problems. It's really just to communicate back and forth, mainly information and status. Be, again, a positive to your day. This is a great meeting where you can say, these are the things we need to work on, this is how we're doing, and then keep that positive attitude going as you get ready to go out and start production or start your service process. Another good thing is, if items do come up, one of the things that I see that we don't do very good in most companies is follow up on the items that come up. Now, it's a very skilled leader that can keep track of all the things that they have to follow up on, but it's one of the skills that you should incorporate in is to be able to track time and to be able to follow up on items so things don't fall in the crack. All of us need help on being able to address all issues that we have to deal with and make sure nothing falls through the cracks. So it is a good skill that we can start teaching and coaching for. But as a leader, not only does the supervisor can follow up, we as managers and other leaders can help support our supervisors by following up and keeping things out in front so that they will be visible and they can be addressed and improved upon. So now, with all that work done, we actually just start our shift. At 7 o'clock in the morning, the whistle goes, and we start the shift and work begins. Once that happens, at 7:01, a good lean leader would actually start confirming the quality of a product. This is where you would just do a spot check on some of the parts in the area, maybe parts that are starting to leave the area, and then if you're a particular focused area, say you're in the paint area, maybe you want to check thickness this morning. Or if you're in an assembly area, maybe you want to do some torque checks on certain areas. And what you want to do is find out different things that you want to look at. Maybe it's checking to see if the labeling on your liquids in the area follow the standards and make sure that they show if it's a volatile piece of liquid or it's another component. Or is the material tagged correctly? Is the elements of your work area from a quality point of view conforming to the quality standards that you set? So you would decide what would be best for your area. Say about 7:30, here's a turn where you, every day, should be looking at what standard work is being done. So really we call this verifying standard work. So you would actually take the standard work documentation you have and you would confirm that team members are following that. Are they going through the job instructions, standard work layouts? Check for your safety and quality points. Are you going through tack time? Is the standard work process being followed? When you have a one-piece cell set, is there one piece between each component of that cell, or are you stacking up material for some reason? This is where you want to ensure that standard work is being followed. And this is something that should be done daily, and I would suggest that if you have 5 team members reporting to you, that you would check each one of those team members throughout the day. One of the things that help you on the standard work is that this job is not just for the line supervisors. it can actually be done by the area managers, VPs, and presidents. And one of the tools that we've introduced before is the Kamishibai system, where you use audit cards to help people verify standard work or make sure that the system's following the way it's set up. It's really a simple card system, and we won't go into a lot of detail about it, but it's a simple card system where you can use the power of green and red to show, is it in compliance or not? Are you following the standard or not? And you can actually write down the areas or the points that you want the person with the card to actually check and audit down on the workstations. So you can have different levels of this. If you look at the system here, here we show daily, weekly, and monthly checks, and in this particular system you can have it set up where the daily checks are done by the line supervisors, and then the weekly checks can be done by the area managers, and the monthly checks can be done by the, say, the directors, VPs, or presidents of the company. And they would be checking basically the same thing that you're checking, but on a different scale. Where you're checking it daily, they're checking on a weekly or monthly basis. And then it becomes a layered audit where they're checking to make sure that you're doing your checks. So if you're not sure what to check for, you can actually work with a team and look at elements of what should be checked, put them on simple cards, post this on a board, and now you have a simple card system where people know this is what I need to check on this frequency. Now 8 o'clock rolls around, and one of the things is another good tool that you can put in your day to understand how the process is going is a simple production control board or an hour-by-hour chart. So you set up production of how it's going to be paced during the day. So how are you tracking? Are you ahead or behind? This tool can help you track that and look to see if you need to make some corrections or modifications throughout the day. So 8 o'clock, the first hour is done, you would certainly want to update your board. Now this can be done actually by the team leader themselves, or it could be done by one of the associates at, say, one critical portion of the line, so you can actually assign this responsibility. So it's not something that you necessarily have to do as a lean supervisor, but certainly want it to be done within your area, so it's a good task to involve team members to help you with this board. But if you do have team members doing this, you certainly want to sign off where you're checking it on a regular basis. So this hour-by-hour chart or production control board is very simple, where you break down the statuses by hour, and then you're checking to see, are you meeting that production level? Are you actually performing to your planned level? And then you can show where the problems are, so you actually write down reasons why you don't make that, and then you put down countermeasures what you're working on. One of the good tools of this is, in 10 seconds, can you determine the status of your cell? Status being, are you ahead or behind planned schedule? This tool can help you do that. There are many, without this tool, there are many areas where you can walk down to area and you have no idea if you are ahead or behind schedule to meet your customer requirements. So this actually is a good visual tool to help you do that. 8:15 rolls around, and one of the things that we suggested is that you have knowledge of work. Now there may be instances where you get promoted or moved over to an area, or you get cross-trained, that you may not know every job in the line or the area. So what do you do? Well, a good countermeasure is to provide time in your schedule that you actually start to learn those jobs on the line. And you want to do this until you're able to do every job in the area. You go through what the recommended documentations are, like the job instructions, the standard work, make sure that that's right, look again at your key points, but actually have your team members teach you if you don't know that. I think one of the elements that we have as lean leaders is that we are afraid that we will look foolish, or that we don't know is a bad sign. But if you go down to an operator and say, I'd like to learn this, you certainly want to encourage team members to teach you. I've been supervisors in many areas. One, I was a supervisor in a welding area. I'm not a certified welder. I didn't know how to weld. So I had team members start to teach me, and I actually took a class that was conducted by a team member. And embarrassingly enough, the very first piece I welded the piece to the welding table. They got a good laugh out of that, but that just shows that you're trying to learn how to do the task. So you are in an ability to teach that task in a later point. So that's the elements that you want to get to, is to actually spend time to learn the job. So what you're going to end up doing is gaining knowledge from that process, and then you're going to start developing your skill about that process. And as the knowledge and skills start going, now it becomes you're self-aware, you're understanding, you know what that process is. It becomes second nature, so now you can be well-versed into teaching that skill. Well, that's a rough morning so far. We've done a lot of tasks. It's time for break. Yes, all of us, even lean leaders, need to take break time. So at 9:30, we'll go ahead and schedule our simple break, and then we can relax a little bit and collect some thoughts and understand how we need to go after break to continue on the day. So break's over, time to get back to work. One of the first things that you should do is check to confirm that the line has a smooth startup. You, again, want to check the quality of the product. Make sure that there may not be any maintenance items that happen. Make sure all your associates are back on the line and everything's running smooth. So that now that we've got that covered, maybe right after break you want to conduct a short safety meeting at some time. Now that everybody's back, let's have a 2 to 5 minute meeting on one safety topic. It could be about lifting or deciding not to lift. Maybe it's an element of how do you handle your material safely in your process. Maybe it's about your basic process of handling both volatile equipment or things that are safety guides and lockout, tagout. There's all kinds of simple little safety 1 or 2 minute, 1 point lessons that you can incorporate into a short meeting and have that conducted during that time. So after that, about 10 o'clock, you have a Gemba walk with your manager. This is a great, another great tool where that you can get one-on-one time with your manager and you can walk the process, and then you can understand what the process is, and you can give them an update. And perhaps through this coaching moment that your manager can point out things that you haven't seen before and can guide you into becoming a better, stronger leader. And maybe you'll get some tasks of some activities to work on, things to Kaizen as a result of this walk. Say 11 o'clock turns around, and one of the things you want to do is look at your training matrix for the employees in your area. Maybe you want to confirm that you're on track with your training plan, because one of the elements of a good lean leadership program is that you're developing and training people. So you should have a plan, if that's one of your goals, of how you're going to improve the skill of the employees in your area. Maybe you have some updates or adjustments. Maybe some of the jobs changed. But certainly want to keep track that you are going on track to that plan, and maybe you have an element where you're going to train someone on a certain specific task. 11:30 is lunchtime. Certainly want to relax and have lunch, but maybe you want to consider spending about half your time with your team members. This is a great way of encouraging some team building skills and allowing you to go forward and learn a little bit more about the personalities, about your associates, and you can bond a little bit more. And the main thing you're trying to do is build trust. The trust is one of the best elements of a foundation of a good relationship between you and your lean supervisor. Lunch is over, so maybe you want to have some time for Kaizen. Kaizen is one of the things that everybody says, we don't have time for Kaizen. We're so busy doing work. And it's one of the elements that you basically have to make the time. You can't afford not to do Kaizen. So actually put into your schedule that you're going to do some Kaizen on the line. So say right after lunch is going to be your Kaizen time. Another good tool that you could use is this task Kanban. Maybe you have elements that you're working on, and some of your team members are doing elements too, but have one in your department that these are just not simple post-it notes. These are some simple tasks that we want to improve upon. And as you can see from the board, as you do them, you move in the doing column. As you're waiting on something, you put in wait, but when you complete it, you just move it more toward the right. It's actually a good visual system. And if you're not sure what Kanban to use, you just pick one off the board and work on that task. Another element is the Kaizen newspaper, which is another great tool that we use in Kaizen events, but it's not just for Kaizen events. You can use Kaizen newspapers in a daily tool out on the shop floor. So in the Kaizen newspaper, either in a department or in your area, you can actually capture all the problems that are going on, put some root causes in there, who's working on the countermeasures, put in some assignments, and then check the status. So again, another visual tool that you could use during this Kaizen time to know what activities that you're working on. 1:45 rolls around, and it may be time that you need to notify your team members that, gosh, we're not quite on schedule. We may have to deal with overtime. So it's actually good to let employees know to plan their day, because they do have lives outside of work. That is it possible to run overtime? You know, most people don't give that notification up front, and they just say either you're going to have it or you're not, or we're going to do it at the end of the week. But it's really good to allow team members to realize that, yes, we may have some overtime, so let them know ahead of time so they can make some plans. Of course, this is dependent on union agreements if you're in a union facility as to timing when you need to notify on overtime. 2 o'clock rolls around. Again, we have another break, time to relax. You can also meet with your team members and get to know them a little bit better, or just take some time to prepare for later in the day going forward. But just relax a little bit, take a break. And then 2:15 comes around, maybe you have your supervisor meeting. This is where you want to spend a little time to prepare, understand what the status in your area is, pertaining basically to the safety, quality, cost, and delivery. Gather up the information you need, and then go to your supervisor meeting. This is a meeting that you report the status of your area to your managers, and then the other areas you hear what they're doing. And it's a simple communication tool to understand how we're doing in the area. After the supervisor's meeting, maybe you go back to the line and walk it. Walk the line again, check on quality, check on standard work, check to make sure what the processes are and be visible on the line. 3:15 rolls around, you can have a daily 5S. This is where you actually have assigned tasks where people do participate, grab a broom or a mop, grab a rag, do whatever the tasks that are assigned to you and participate alongside of your associates, and clean up your area as scheduled. All right, 3:30 runs around. Looks like we didn't have overtime today. Great. So just wish everybody a good night. Have them have a good night, and thank them for their efforts as they go forward. And as they leave, you still have a couple things that you need to do as a lean supervisor. One would be to update your shift-to-shift logbook. Again, that could be a logbook, or it could be on the computer, whichever works best for you and your system and culture and environment. But write down, and you should have written down maybe a couple during the day, but make sure it's updated by the end of the day so you can transfer or communicate that information to the next shift so they can be prepared. Then 3:40, prepare for your next day works. This is where you had some tools. If you remember earlier, you had like the Kamishibai board and you had the production control board. You had other areas where, if you saw that there are multiple places that you had problems and Kaizen activities going on, those things actually get erased each day and start over. Things that haven't been accomplished or completed or were taken care of, you don't want to lose that. So this way you could probably transfer them into the Kaizen newspaper so you don't lose that, so it then becomes more of a historical record. Maybe you want to transfer them to your task board. But it's essential that you really make sure that the line is left in a good condition. You make sure that you have passed on information to the next, and then you're preparing for everything for the next day. Make sure tools are in the right spot. Make sure that you take a moment to understand what needs to be focused on for the next day. And then basically have a plan of action to get ready for tomorrow's production. Now that was a lot of tasks if you look at them. And one of the things that you're starting to see now is this falls in line with leader standard work. And one of the tools that we could actually show a template and include this in a webinar and with Gemba Academy is a simple template that you can create and use for your standard work. And it could be a checkoff sheet that you can carry with you. You can put it on your iPad for that matter. But essentially, these are the tasks that you plan to do. And then you want to look to see if you were interrupted during the day against your plan. So this is actually very similar to your hour-by-hour chart, but it's really a plan of what your day is versus your actual of what your day started. Because even though I guarantee you have this set out for the day, things are going to happen and it's going to mess up your schedule. Do you not agree? You're going to have things that don't follow plan because things are going to pop up. And you're going to have to adjust for them from a customer point of view, or if your boss comes in and says, I want you to do this, you're certainly going to do that. So this will allow you to keep track of those interruptions that happen. And then, of course, you can put countermeasures. How can you prevent that in the future so you can move more toward meeting your actual plan? So some of the characteristics of a lean supervisor is that you need to believe in the need of a safe work environment. A safe work environment is one of the foundations that we need when we come to work. We need to know that we're going to be safe at work. So believe in that and look at how you can make sure that you have a safe work environment. Again, know the processes in your areas backwards and forwards. One of the first things I learned as an engineer is that my boss taught me to be a sponge in an area, that you actually need to go in there and really understand it. So you want to know that area better than anyone else. So know it forwards and backwards, backwards and forwards. Be able to train each associate at each process using standard work. That should be one of the key characteristics of a good lean supervisor. Be able to lead problem solving quickly. Do you understand what PDCA is? Can you effectively use it? Can you use it in a quick process? Or does it take you 3 weeks to write a simple problem statement or an A3? That's a gap that you need to look at to improve your processes so you can lead problem solving with your area. Know the metrics in your area. You certainly want to know what your cost deliverables are. You want to know what your takt time is. You want to know what your quality levels are. So those measures and metrics you certainly want to be familiar with. And then, of course, any training requirements or issues that your company sets forth as standards, because all companies have certain cultural policy standards that they want to follow. You certainly want to understand that and follow them. So that basically wraps up what we consider the characteristics of a good lean supervisor. If you look at this whole process, what we're looking at is a continuous improvement cycle. And it starts out with standardization. What is the baseline standard? What's the standard for my day? What's the standard for the work? You've heard that term used several times during this webinar. What we want to do is establish what that standard is, and then we want to move toward making sure that we adhere to whatever standard we have set up. Are we following it or not? Is there a gap? And that's where we start doing analysis. Where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities for improvement? Once we make those visible, once we have a good standard in place, then we want to say, how do we improve that gap? What's the timing of what we're going to do? What resources are we going to need? What knowledge may be needed to understand how to improve that? And once we've improved it and closed that gap, that becomes the new standard. And then from that new standard, we check to make sure it adheres. And if we don't have adherence, we're going to analyze it, look for gaps again, and improve it. So now it becomes a cycle of our continuous improvement. And if you notice, doesn't that look pretty close to plan, do, check, act cycle? So again, it's following the same basic approach. So I actually have a challenge to you. Here's something that I have done at several other companies, and it actually is a pretty fun challenge if you look at it. Speaking of this is standard and this is gap and this is where we need to improve to, here's one thing you can do, especially if you're listening to this in a group. As a subgroup, maybe you want to discuss what you learned today and day in life and compare it to what your typical life as a supervisor is. And if you're not sure and you're going by memory, what's the best thing that we can do? Well, we can collect data, right? Let's be data focused on this. So for the, say, the next 5 days of your work life, why don't you keep a just small journal log of things that you basically do for the day, and then after the 5 days, get back with your group and then compare it to the day that you just heard this morning, this afternoon. You know, compare it to an ideal life of a lean supervisor. Look where things are similar. What are some things similar to this that you do and some things that you don't, and compare that to the ideal day. What are some of the differences? What's missing in your 5 days of your life at work? What tasks seem to have no value that you continually to do each day? Why don't we look at trying to move from doing those non-value added tasks, stop doing those, and trying to replace them with things that have more value based on what you just learned here on a good, ideal, lean supervisor life. And then, of course, what barriers? This is easy to say, but it may not be that easy to implement. So what barriers exist that keep you from meeting that ideal day? Now, what are some of the opportunities that you have, and what are the constraints that you're having to say that I can't just do this, you know, when I end this webinar today or first thing tomorrow? So those are good discussion points, and you may actually, through this process of reflecting on how you actually perform as a lean supervisor during the day or as a leader of lean supervisors to what we want to move toward on an ideal state, let's come up with a plan to how we get there. Work together as your team to say, wow, that was a pretty good approach. Why don't we try some of those things and see what we can do and what we learn from that? Now, I'm not saying that this day that I just showed you is what is a perfect day. Of course, we're all looking at how we improve from where we are today to a perfect day. And maybe not all these elements will work in your culture or your particular environment, but you certainly want to say what from that day that we just learned here today should or makes sense for us to do to support. Are we developing people? Are we following standard work? Are we looking at continuous improvement daily? Are we doing elements within that to make problems visible? If those are the principles we believe in lean, what behaviors are we doing on a daily basis that are not supporting that, and how can we adjust, structure, or create our day, track our days that we're following that? So that's a good challenge that I challenge you. If you want to try this, see what you can learn from it and try this example as an exercise. Well, that wraps up my portion of what I want to talk about, and hopefully you found some good benefits by looking at how a lean day would look like for a good lean supervisor. And maybe you're already thinking about that's completely different than how my supervisors or how I spend my day, and maybe that will help facilitate some discussions of how we can move toward a better day for a lean supervisor. So, Ron, I'll let you take over, and maybe we have some good questions we can help answer in the few minutes that we have left.
Yeah. We have lots of questions that have come in here, Mike, so we'll get through as many of them as we can here. Great job again, Mike.
Thank you.
So first question comes from Tom, and Tom says, do you have any advice for how these same lean supervisor principles can be applied to those of us who don't work in a manufacturing environment?
Great question. Yes, this is a simple example within manufacturing how we want to do that. But if you look at it, the same elements of quality, same elements of standard work, same elements of making problems visible, you should have an idea of what performance that needs to be done, what output needs to be done for the day. So if you understand the processes, you can just apply it to whatever process you're doing in an office. So yeah, do you understand the process of how to do your permits through the process? Do you know how to close the books in accounting? What is the process steps? Do you have standard work created? And usually that's the first place to look. And then if you look at it not in the manufacturing point of view, but look at it, what are the processes that I'm dealing with, and just apply the same approach, and you should have pretty much the same results of these are the things that are important that I need to check every day. Hopefully that will answer what you're looking for.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so Norca, hope I'm saying that name right, asked a question early in the webinar at about 10 minutes in, so I think you did kind of cover this, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyhow.
Sure.
They mentioned that I didn't see in the list of roles of the supervisor where they're engaging employees in the identification and solution of problems. Shouldn't it be included in the role of the supervisor?
Yeah, it was implied. I'm putting the responsibility on the lean supervisor to be the main person to facilitate and lead that. But absolutely, if you can engage every employee into identifying and being problem solvers, that would be the ultimate of what you want. So it's more implied instead of explicit.
Okay. Tristan asked, do you have any advice for where to learn more about the Kamishibai system?
Yes, Gemba Academy. Yeah, I think if I understand, we still have a module on that. Is that correct?
Yeah. The Leader Standard Work course that you presented, Mike.
I think yes, I did. You know, as a matter of fact, I think I remember that. But yes, we have that on there. There's a module on that. And if you have any particular questions after watching that module, I would certainly be glad to answer them.
Very good. Okay. Nikhil, I think that's how I say that name, said, we have communication boards for each supervisor in their respective areas, mainly highlight safety, quality, delivery, production issues, improvement ideas, and 5S, but no one uses it. How can I encourage supervisors to use the communication board during their morning stand-up meetings?
Okay, great question. I call that corporate wallpaper. We see the cool visuals that we learn in Lean, and we think that Lean is created in them, but we don't realize that it's a problem that we're trying to solve. It's a tool that we want to use. So one of the key things that you can do, is meet around the board on a daily basis. So use it as a tool. Excuse me, that's one way of doing it. And then make sure it's updated. And then audit. Ask people why it's not being used. Now, hopefully that will help.
Okay. All right. Okay, so next question. So Mike asked that there was, he said no free allotment for meetings or surprises, question mark.
No free allotment.
In other words, I think he meant that there was no free allotment in your Leader Standard Work template there.
Okay, couple things in there. Not all the tasks took the full 20 or 30 minutes, or maybe the 15 minutes between it. Maybe your task took 5 minutes, and then you would have some gaps within that day. That would be one element to look at. The other one is, really, are all those meetings that important? What elements of the work is more important, and maybe you want to move some of those meetings into another communication type tool, like maybe a simple email would be helpful on some things where we have meetings that are useless. Maybe it's that if you have certain meetings that are critical, maybe you have already set a standard work that you put them in your schedule, so you'd have to adjust it accordingly. And then you certainly want to look at, are your meetings too long? Are you spending 2 or 3 hours in a meeting when a 15-minute meeting could be better use of your time by going with a simpler agenda system? So you're definitely going to have a struggle trying to look at how to put in all these extra meetings in there. So and if you find that you do have these ad hoc meetings, maybe you want to put in, we have no meeting times in the morning because this is our standard work, but from 2 to 3, say every day is your ad hoc meeting window. So if we ever have any ad hoc meetings, we can set that in as part of your schedule. So be creative.
Okay, very good. They keep coming in, Mike, here, so we'll keep going here. We've got a few more minutes. Rudy asks, there are some tasks that are more critical than others. Shouldn't they be identified?
Yeah, I think that would be really good. If you want to, you could do a Pareto chart, and these are the most critical tasks. These are the least critical. But the idea is if you highlight them on your day that if a few of these tasks you don't get to, that's not as critical as others. But certainly, if that helps you perform at a higher level to get those tasks done, yeah, absolutely. I would say highlight them.
Okay. Mike asks, how does a supervisor escalate issues or receive instructions, for example, new tact or rush order?
Oh, yes. I would look at what is your standard work for that. How is that delivered? Is it an email? Is it a phone call? Do you have cell phone numbers that they call you and say that this is hot? Or do they leave a post-it note on your computer or desk? But certainly, I think if you have a system, you want to understand what that system is and make sure that that gets communicated, hopefully earlier in the day than better, so that you can prepare for it. But I would say that you should establish a good, clear, single point of contact so that things don't get lost, and that you highlight it maybe in your daily meeting. But certainly you want to escalate that as quickly as possible, because usually those are urgent elements that need to be incorporated into your day.
Okay. Julian has a question, and how does the day in the life change as the management role becomes more and more senior up to the executive level?
Excellent question. Well, what you noticed here is that the day was pretty structured. Wouldn't you agree? As you're closer to the direct work, the structure of your day is more structured. Believe it or not, as you go up the chain, your structure is less structured because you are doing more higher level strategic elements. Plus, you want to be more responsive to direct contact with your customers. So let's say that 90% of your day as a lean supervisor is structured, and as you go to manager, maybe it's 70% of your day. As you go to director, maybe it's 60% of your day, and as you go to vice president, it's 50% of your day. So as you go up the hierarchy in your organization, your structure is a little bit less, a little bit more open, but you certainly want to make sure that you do follow some basics, same elements of everyone should have Kaizen in their schedule, everyone should have quick stand-up meetings, everyone should have a good communication plan, everyone should be following standard work and auditing it.
Okay. Adam asks, how do you ensure meetings are kept under 5 minutes and are focused?
Great question. There's all kinds of tools that you could use. The first thing I would recommend is have an agenda. And the agenda is not just the task, but how much time you're going to take on each of those tasks. So if you're going to have a 15-minute meeting, you plan out those 15 minutes. Second thing you do is adhere to it. Have a egg timer, have a watch, have a person keeping time for you. I've seen meetings where they actually put up on the large screen a countdown clock, and it's going off during the meeting so that you have to follow to that time. And then when the time ends, you end the meeting. So it's, again, a discipline that you do. And I've used all those personally in meetings, and it actually works pretty well once you learn the standard.
Okay. Jose asked, when you said prepare the operator to learn, what did you mean by that?
Oh, now we're getting to the training within industry. What you're doing is when you're preparing the operator to learn, and you can learn more when you click on the internet about training within industry, what you're doing is making them comfortable with being open to learn something. You'd be friendly, say hi, how are you, how do you feel, are you feeling stressed about trying to learn this? So what you're trying to do is bridge a little bit of trust, and of course training with industry will tell you more about how to do that, but the idea is to get them where you're encouraging them to, now let's get excited about learning something new, and then you're also trying to clear their mind a little bit about things that may be thinking about, like, gosh, I got half an hour to do this training session and I'm getting way behind in my work. You want to try to get them to forget those things. So there's all these little elements that they can help you within the training within the industry to get you so that they're now open to learn a new skill.
Okay, very good. Brian has a question, and it is, are there any Kaizen solutions or programs specifically tailored for healthcare or hospitals, which are typically a less task-oriented environment?
I think some of these same elements I've seen in a lot of healthcare situations. They do stand-up meetings. They do try to follow and create standard work. They do have audit systems. They are checking for quality and delivery of their product. I think you just have to look at it in a different context of how the processes in the healthcare industry work. But a lot of these same basic tools, of course they wouldn't have an hour-by-hour chart per se, but you certainly would have that what's the flow and what's interrupting the flow. If you're changing over a theater for an operating, what's our standard work for the changeover of the theater, and are we following that and making those problems visible? So you don't necessarily have that production mentality, but you certainly have tools that you can use in that environment.
Very good. So let's go ahead and do one last question, Mike, here, and it is, how can I create, Anthony asked, how can I create a good cross-training program to develop others to know their coworkers' job or duties?
There's a lot of cool things you can experiment with, and I would suggest you try it. One of the things that I've done in the past is that first identify what training skills are needed by each of the associates that were in my team. The other thing I did was, if I'm working on station, say, B, I wanted to make sure that the operator that worked on station B knew station A and C. So the first thing I looked at is, do you know not only your task, but do you know the task that of the person that's sending you the item, and do you know the task that you're sending your items to? So basically what's before and after you is a good way to start and learn. And then once you start creating what the needs are, then you can come up with a plan of how I'm going to train them. Maybe a job rotation would be another excellent thing. It both helps you on a safety point of view and ergonomics, but then you can also get the cross-training going through the process. Maybe you have a session where one of your team members can be assigned to teach your team in 15 minutes one of the tasks that they do. And just make it in small bite-sized elements. That way over time you'll learn all the elements. So hopefully those are a couple ideas to help get you going in that direction. And certainly be creative and think of a few others.
Okay, very good, Mike. All right, well, thanks again, Mike. We're going to end it there. So hopefully we can get Mike back on to do another webinar. What we would love to hear is your feedback on, we've already gotten lots of feedback here that they liked it, Mike. So if you have any ideas for future webinars, go ahead and email those to us and let us know, because we definitely take requests. And Mike, did you have any final words?
No, I just want to thank you for the time that you took here. I certainly encourage you to take what you learned here and use it. Compare what your day of your life at work is to what would be ideal. And is that matching the principles of Lean, and is that matching what you're trying to accomplish within your organization? And then have fun with it, because this is a pretty exciting way to improve.